Hello and welcome to this Draw With Me video where I draw some eyes. I start by creating a new canvas and then selecting a photo of my own eye that I took a while ago that I will use as a reference, and then I just get to sketching. I sketch pretty lightly with the round brush in the painting section in Procreate and try to get the shape as close as possible to the reference picture. I wanted to try a different way of recording my videos, so instead of using the Procreate time-lapse, I actually record with my phone to show what I'm doing more properly and show my hands doing the work. So this is mostly just a test. I'm not trying to make the perfect drawing, I'm just kind of sketching out and yeah, drawing with low pressure and seeing if I like this new recording style. So here I've drawn the eye and I'm just adding in the eyebrow, and then the eye is pretty much ready to get colored. So the first thing I do is that I go into my layer and then I turn the opacity down just by clicking that layer with 2 fingers and then swiping a little bit to the left. First I color picked from the picture and used that color, but then I didn't really like it and it felt a little bit too dark, so I went with a pre-picked color from my own color palette, which is a color that I use a lot. And here I'm working with that skin tone, and in the end I actually don't like it and start color picking from the picture again because it was just too light. And this time around, instead of starting with the shadows and the blush, I start with the highlights. Don't really know why I did that. I tend to end with the highlights, but I started with it here and it turned out pretty good, I think. And then I color picked the eye color, or the, I don't know what it's called, the whites of the eye, and it was pretty dark, so I went a lot lighter with it. Then I add this black line on the upper eyelid, which I end up taking away later because it's just way too dark and not the look that I'm going for, because I'm going for more of a soft look. And then it's time for the shadow, which is just a darker version and more reddish version of the midtone. Then I add that on, and then I decide that it's not blushy enough. I wanted it to be lighter and more orangey, so I did that and added that in. Then I color in the waterline. I also decide on a more of a peachy, orange, pinkish color because it fit the skin tone the most. And then I mix the darker shadows under the eyes, or like the eye bags, which is a more of a pinkish, purpley color. And here I'm brightening up the whites of the eyes a bit with some pure white, and then I add a little bit of that in the middle as well before brightening up the highlights. Then I add some extra highlight on the top of the eyelids because I think it's cool and pretty. This is not the most realistic thing, but I think it looks good. It makes it look more shiny. Then I do a similar thing with the waterline. Then I add some shadow underneath where the eyebrow would have been. And here I'm picking the perfect eye color for this drawing. For this particular eye, I chose a greenish color, and I tried to choose different for each individual eye that I make. I make 3 eyes in this video. This eye is definitely the most subtle of the 3 eyes, because here I'm just kind of getting started, testing things out, seeing if I remember how to draw eyes in general. So this is more like a warm-up more than anything else. So here I draw in the pupil of the eye, and when I finally finish that, which takes some time because there's a lot of trial and error of the shape, but when I finally figure that out, I can start shading it, and I just start by shading on the topper part of the eye and then a little bit around it, and then I go with like highlights underneath and a little bit inside of the pupil as well. So the video of the drawing process that you're seeing on the screen right now is all in double speed because I can't speed it up anymore in this limiting editing program that I'm using, and each eye took me about 20 minutes to make. And here I start on the eyelashes. I usually just use the round brush in the painting section to make the eyelashes in my normal drawings, but since this video is only of an eye and it's like a close-up, I had to make them better and more realistic. So here I'm using the technical pencil in the lining section, and they're coming out a little bit chunky and not as natural as I would have wanted, and that is mostly because of the streamline that this brush has. So it is looking a bit messy and I didn't really like this version all that much, but I did finish all of the eyelashes before I tried out a new brush, and that brush is the 6B pencil in the sketching section in Procreate. So that is the brush that I'm using right now for the eyelashes. I like that one a lot better. I still don't think it's perfect because it has this texture and I'm going for a more of a smooth look, but it is the best one that I could find. I tried all of the other sketch brushes and I tried all of the other lining brushes, and this gave me the best look of the default Procreate brushes that there are. Overall, I don't think the eyelashes are bad, but I think they could have been better if I used a more specialized brush for this. And here I'm just adding in the final details of the eye, such as a little eye shine that I'm adding in now. I also put a tiny little white star to make it a little bit more unique and more cartoony, and then I just add some final shadings around the eye to make it a bit more three-dimensional before I move on to the second eye. So here is the final result of the first eye. I think it turned out pretty good. And then here I'm just moving the eye a little bit to the left so that I have space for the other eyes, and then I find the new picture, the new reference. I flip it this time so so all the eyes are in the same direction, and then I can get to sketching. So here the sketching process is pretty much the same. I am still using the round brush in the painting section, and then I just lightly sketch in the most important lines so that I know where I'm going to be coloring. And here I'm sketching in the eyebrow, and I decided to actually draw in the eyebrow this time, or coloring it in, which I did not do on the first eye. Here the eye is pretty much done. I'm just adding in the final details, which are the eyelashes, and then I can start coloring it in. So here I use the same layer as I used for the skin tone in the first eye, and I struggled a little bit with the skin color. I was thinking maybe pink, but then in the end I end up with this sort of light turquoise color. And here I realized that the eye was a little bit too long in a way, so I went and fixed that before I started coloring it in. So here I'm also coloring it in the same way as the first eye, but this time I start with the shadows, and I also decide to use pink shadows, just for shits and giggles really. I wanted this eye to be a bit more creative than the other one, because the other one was really basic, so that's why I went with kind of weirder colors, and I'm trying to make it a bit more fun. Pink and turquoise are also one of my favorite color combos. I think they look really good together, and I've already used it in a portrait before many years ago, so I knew it would work. So here I color in the whites of the eyes, and then I make the sketch a bit lighter just so it would be easier for me to see where the different parts are supposed to go. Then I shade the whites of the eyes with this more greenish gray to match the skin tone. Then I go with a pretty vibrant light pink for the waterline, which I feel like fits with the skin tone very well. And here I'm just fixing up the shadows a little bit before I go in and make the corner of the eye with the same nice pink color that I used for the waterline. So here I finally start on the highlights. First I start with just normal white, but then later I realized that that's maybe not the best move, so here I'm still working with white, but then I change it to this very strong, bright turquoise, and I feel like that fit the skin tone a lot better. Then we put a little bit of highlight underneath the eyebrow and fix the one on the upper eyelid. And then after that, we can finally start coloring in the eye. And for that, I choose this very nice pink color. And I just color that in there before I start shading it. And at first I put alpha lock on so that I can color on the sides and stuff without coloring everywhere. And I work from the shadows first. First I gave her a normal pupil, but then I realized that I wanted to do something different. I didn't want them all to look the same, so I chose a little heart in the middle. Then I put another tinier heart on the inside of the heart that we already made. And then I fix the heart, which takes a little bit of time before I can start on the highlights on the bottom of the eye. Then I gave the eye some nice turquoise sparkles instead of the normal white highlights that I would normally give the eye. I also wanted to add some more hearts, so I started by adding some hearts on the bottom of the eye, but then I didn't really like it, so I put them over the eyebrow instead. And then I evaluate the eye thoroughly before deciding on adding one more sparkle and a tiny little heart inside of the other heart. And then it was time for the eyelashes, and this time I actually clicked on the HB pencil instead of the 6B pencil by accident, but it has basically the same results, so it doesn't really matter. First I thought maybe I should make some white eyelashes or turquoise ones, but in the end I ended with this dark magenta-ish pink color. Then I decide on giving her an eyebrow, and I don't change the pencil or anything, and I just go ham on the eyebrow. It would probably have a better result if I used another brush, but I am very lazy and I don't really care, so I just decided to use this one, even though it looks a little messy and a little bit unrealistic, but we're not really going for hyper-realism in this video, we're just having fun. Then I add two little stars, purple stars on her face, and fix a few tiny little details that didn't really need any fixing. And then the eye is pretty much done. And then we can go, oh no wait, I put some purple. I put some purple in the eye, which actually looks pretty good. And then I can move this eye a little bit so that we have space for the last eye. So this last eye was drawn later in the day, which is why everything is a lot darker, and I had to do that because my phone died and I record with my phone. So here I find the last picture, the last reference that I want to use, and then I erase around it and sketch in the eye just like with all of the other eyes that I made in this video. So again, I'm going very lightly with the round brush in the painting section, following the reference pretty closely and drawing in a similar shape that I'm looking at. And here I draw in the eyelashes, and I think these eyelashes are actually the most satisfying of the bunch because they go sort of over the eye in like a I don't care type of fashion, and I think it looks really nice. This eye also gets a little eyebrow, so I draw that in real quick. And then I can start coloring. So I decided on a darker skin tone this time. So first I just used a color that I have in my pre-made color palette or in my skin tone color palette that I tend to use, but then I made it a tad lighter. And the reason for that is that I tend to overuse that skin tone because I really like it, so that's why I made it a bit lighter so it's a tad different from the color that I usually use. And I go a lot back and forth with the skin tone because I just cannot decide. But in the end I chose the lighter version of it and then start shading it with a nice orangey red color that I really like. That will be my blush color, and then I use a darker shade of the mid-tone for the shading. Here I go even heavier on the blush color before I decide to do the highlights. So the highlights for this skin tone, I usually use this sort of beige color. I don't really like using straight white because it just looks kind of wrong. So I definitely recommend, if you are shading darker skin tones, to use this sort of a peachy pink color for the highlights. And then I add this very unrealistic but very satisfying highlight on the upper eyelid. And then some highlight under the eyebrow or on the brow bone. And then I fix the highlights on the eyelids before I add in the waterline. So for the waterline of this skin tone, I like to use a pretty light peachy color to make it sort of pop a bit more, and also so it will look different than the blush color and the skin tone that I use, and also a lot different from the whites of the eyes, which I add later on. So here I just shade in the corner of the eye before I add the whites of the eyes. So the whites of the eyes are also never really white, so I go with this kind of, so I add straight white, but I don't press it hard enough to make it actually white. It's more of a gray color with some of the brown kind of shining through. Here I add some extra white and then a tiny white line on the waterline to make it sort of look more wet. Then I turned down the opacity of the sketch layer so that it'll be easier to see what I'm doing. And then I fixed the waterline white line. Here I am choosing the eye color, and I had a bit of a trouble with that one. I started with an orangey color because I really like yellow and orange with darker skin tones, but I actually wanted to look more cute, so I went with a purple in the end. So I start with a much darker purple than the color I initially started with, and I do that so that the highlights will pop even more when I come to that. So this eye is pretty similar to the first eye that we made. So it has the same shading techniques. So I start with shading the top and then the sides, put some of that lighter purple in the iris, and then I add the highlight. So here you can see that it really does pop a lot more with this darker tone underneath. Here I add an even lighter one, so it becomes very like shiny and pretty. Here I shade the waterline with a more dark reddish color and add a little bit of highlight on that as well. Make it look shiny, make it look nice. Then it is time for those luscious lashes. I go with a darker brown color, not completely black, although I do think I might actually change that later on in the drawing process. When I finish the eyelashes, I go in with the eyebrow, and it's the same technique as the other one. I just go mayhem, color it in real quick, not really thinking about whether it looks too nice. I felt like this eye was a little bit too basic, so I decided to add some eyeshadow to this one, and I put purple in the outer corners and like a yellowish color in the inner corners of the eye, if that is what it's called. I'm not really sure. And then I also added a tiny bit of yellow underneath the lower eyelashes, and then I also started on making these yellow stars, but I didn't really like them, so I took those away and added a tiny little star in the eye instead, so right there. And then I took that away and put a star up over the eye, but I didn't like that either, so I added a little star below the eye instead, and I thought that actually looked pretty cute, so I made it into a sticker and put like a white border around it and shaded it a little bit. So then it was finally time for the eye shine, so I decided on making these white, and I just added some circles and a little line, and then that eye is pretty much done. Here are the final results of the eye in order. So here's the first one. I think it looks pretty good. A little basic, but still good. Here's the second eye, a little bit more wild. And here's the third eye, which is definitely my favorite of the bunch. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I post every Saturday, so subscribe if you want. And have a great day. Goodbye.